Welcome to MWM. Today we're going to do form breakdowns focusing on the upper body. Now, I want us to just focus on how to do each of these movements so when you take class you feel fully prepared. And we're not going to get so much into the scientific jargon of it. I just want to focus on where your body should be in space, how it feels to do the movement, and that way you can get the most out of these classes. Today we are breaking down 5 different movements: bicep curls, overhead presses, dumbbell rows, triceps, and push-ups. A lot of the stuff we're gonna end up talking about will apply to many of those different movements. So you'll hear the same cues a couple times, but we will take time with each so you know exactly what to do. Before we get into it, the thing that I want us to focus on for every single move is engagement, mind-muscle connection. Now, coaches say that all the time. What does that even mean? It literally just means squeeze like your muscles, like squeeze. Like I'm squeezing right now. You can't see anything, but I'm squeezing. Releasing. It's just kind of activating your muscles before the movement even happens. Now, anytime you're doing any sort of upper body movement, I want us to think our core is engaged and we have really nice posture. So I have a slight bend in my legs. I feel grounded in the ground. I have a small kind of like tuck in my pelvis, so everything's facing forward. My core feels engaged and I'm standing nice and tall as if someone's grabbing the end of my spine and kind of pulling me up. Now, when we're doing all of our crazy classes and we're moving around doing all the things, we might not be perfectly standing still, but when you're building strength, you want to create good habits even if you're not lifting so heavy to start. Like if I'm doing a row, I want to make sure everything is perfect even if I'm not lifting my heaviest, so that when I add the extra resistance, I already have those good habits to fall back on. So regardless of which move we're doing, whether we're like in a plank position doing push-ups on the ground, hinge doing a row, or standing nice and tall, my core is engaged, my shoulders are rolled back, I feel really center before I start anything. Our first move is a bicep curl, which seems so simple, but we're in our nice solid stance and the muscles you're obviously working are your biceps, and then your shoulders, your delts, and your core are secondary to make sure everything stays strong. Now, the lever system you're focusing on is obviously your elbow. I like to think like if I'm just standing doing rows, my elbow isn't like moving all around. My elbow is nice and still, and then I'm lifting and lowering. I always like to keep, when I pull my arms back down, I like to keep my palms facing towards me. I supinate and turn my palms towards me at the top, and then again facing in at the bottom. If you're someone that has like hyperextended elbows, sometimes if you leave your palms facing forward at the bottom, you're going to hyperextend, which might not hurt in this moment today, but you might feel it in like 30, 40, 50 years. You might have that, a little bit of pain in your joints, and we always want to protect our joints. So I like to keep my palms facing towards me. I supinate as I come up and down, and I'm not allowing that elbow to move as I curl. Okay, let's grab some weights and try it. So, easy enough. This will be like one of the easiest ones we do. Palms facing in, curling up, taking it back down, curling up, taking it back down. Now, when you're in class and I have you doing all the fun, crazy things, your arms are gonna move obviously, but you're still thinking the motion is from that elbow. So even if my elbow's up here and we're crossing over, I'm not using my whole arm and my shoulder to help get up. I'm only using it from my elbow. That's how you're gonna get the most out of your bicep curls. And think, you do a bicep curl all the time in life. Anytime like you lift something up, you're lifting anything, that's a curl. So it's important to practice those good habits. Our second move is an overhead press, which obviously focuses on the front delts. You'll get a little bi and tri, and obviously always core. Now, lots of different ways you can kind of go overhead. The most like fundamental strength one, your arms are right here locked in a little bit higher. Your elbows are a little bit higher than a bicep curl, and you press overhead and you take it back down. Simple as that. What gets a little tricky and crazy sometimes is when we reach our arms up we lose control of everything that's happening down here. We want to think we're still in that neutral position and our arms are kind of lifting right next to our biceps, or right next to our biceps, right next to our ears. Our biceps are next to our ears. Now, a way that can help you kind of like control that arch is I like to think like, feel where your two ribs are and imagine you're trying to close that space. So if the ribs kind of fly open, you're trying to close that space and then tuck a little bit underneath. This being solid means you can get more weight over your head. If it's a mobility issue, then you have super tight shoulders like I do, just make sure to do a couple extra stretches in the warm-up before you get into class so that you can safely get those weights right overhead. Let's grab weights and try them. So again, we're gonna do a real standard overhead press. I know I asked you to do a lot of crazy stuff in class, but you practice this first, then you can add on all the variations. So my elbows are right in, my palms are facing each other. I'm pressing overhead, and I'm coming right back down. Pressing overhead and right back down. You could think anytime you're taking something heavy and you're putting it on a top shelf, you're playing with a kid, lifting them up, kind of throwing them, that is an overhead press. Now it might not ever look this like strict and this like contained, but practicing this will help you in real life. Our third move today is a dumbbell row. Now we've been focusing on like this standing up straight position. Now we want to take it into a hinge. If you did our lower body form class, we've already talked about hinges and deadlifts. When you're doing a row, this is kind of the basic stance to be in, and you're hinging down so you could pull that arm back. You can obviously do it with 2 feet. You can rest your hand on a bench or a couch or something, but you're in a hinged position, and you want to think all this good form that you were using here, sucking those rib cages together, kind of neutral hip, feeling really solid. You're just taking this and going meow, and coming almost parallel to the ground. You want to be just about parallel. It's okay if you're a little more lifted, and everything is super engaged here. Now, when you're rowing, I want you to think the motion is pulling, the muscles you're using obviously are your lats, your rear delts, your rhomboids, and then bicep, tricep, and core, obviously. Now, when you're rowing, I want you to think the motion is coming from your elbow. So you're pulling that elbow up and you're releasing back down. Sometimes I can see when people are like leading with their hand, because their hand ends up really close to their body and their elbow will kind of stick out a little bit. You want to think the hand is just along for the ride. The motion is coming through the elbow. So I'm pulling that elbow back and then releasing all the way down. And there's gonna be a slight release in your shoulder, and you're pulling that shoulder back just as much as you're pulling your elbow and releasing back down. If you're pulling back far enough, your hand will land closer to your hip than your rib cage. You tend to pull a little higher if you're leading with your hand. You tend to pull a little further back if you're leading with your elbow, and that's gonna help just engage your lats more, which are big, big muscles. So we want them to help in this movement, okay? Let's just do a 1-arm row, because it's a little bit easier to feel, but obviously you could do 2-arm rows, you could do totally different like rows and hips. You know what we do in class. Now find that solid hinged position. I want you to kind of release your shoulder, pull that shoulder back, pull your elbow back, and then release back down. And then you don't have to separate the two. It could be one smooth motion all the way up. Now just switch hands. Feel it on the other side. Big row, release, row, release. Now, did you ever have one of those like old school lawn mowers that you had to go vroom, vroom to turn on? That's a row in real life. Have you ever been sleeping with your partner and they stole all the blankets and you had to pull the blankets away from them? That's a row. You do rows all day long, so practicing it in class is always what you want. Fourth move is hitting our tricep extensions. And now the tricep is the same movement pattern as a bicep curl. We just have to like contort our body in a way that you hit your tricep versus your bicep. So that can either be in a hinged position holding here, so we hit the tricep, above your head, taking it back so you hit the tricep, or even like laying on the ground, arms straight, doing a skull crusher. Regardless of whatever position you're in, you're thinking of that elbow as your lever joint. Instead of just pulling up, you will be pushing back. Today, let's practice a hinged position. So same position we were just in for our row. We're here, our elbow is lifted and pulled in, everything is engaged, and my arm is just like naturally hanging down. Then I'm gonna push up into the air and I take it right back down, pushing up, taking it right back down. I like to think my pinky finger is trying to reach up to the ceiling and back down, okay? Let's try it with the weights. I'm gonna take a little weight because your triceps are tiny muscles, so you never want too heavy. Get into that row position, push, release, push, release. Yes, triceps always feel so easy for like the first 2 or 3, and you're like shaking because they get so burny. Hold it up, push, in, push, in. And again, regardless of whatever position you're in, whether you're doing it overhead, you want that elbow joint to be stable so that you can just move from that one joint. All the same stuff we talked about in a bicep curl applies to here. And then again, anytime in real life you're doing any sort of pull motion, you're going to end up using those triceps. Our last upper body move is a push-up, which is arguably the hardest move. Now, obviously it's gonna hit your pectorals, also your delts, also your bis and tris and abs and glutes, and everything is working during a push-up. Now, a push-up is an advanced move. It's essentially an advanced plank because you're in that plank position, you're holding a plank, and then you're lowering down to the ground. So if this is a move that you're still working up to, I can only do it on my knees, and I'm only gonna demo it on my knees. That's perfectly fine. You can still have great form and get so much out of the move, even if you're doing a modified push-up. Now, like I just said, you wanna think of it as a moving plank. So whether you're on your feet or your knees, you're finding that perfect plank position. My shoulders are over my wrists, I'm feeling my core engaged, I'm pushing the floor away. This is already super solid before I drop down. I'm gonna do it on my knees because that's where I feel most comfortable. When you go into your push-up, your elbows are going on like a 45-degree angle, and then you come back up. So a little bit easier to see. Imagine you're the floor. I'm on that 45-degree angle. I'm not here because that's gonna get into my traps, which are tiny muscles and won't be helpful. Down here, like a little yoga push-up, that's a lot of triceps. Finding that middle space, it's gonna use more of your bigger muscles in your back and in your chest, which is exactly what you want. You also wanna think of corkscrewing your arms into the ground. If I'm just kind of pushing in without thinking about grounding, just like we do when we're doing squats with our feet, this motion and using the ground is gonna be so helpful. And you're not thinking about coming up, you're thinking about pushing down. It should be called a push down, not a push up. Change petition to changing the name. And then I'm holding my core as if I'm doing a plank. So again, let's try a few together. Find that perfect plank position, corkscrewing my arms into the ground. I'm lowering down, I'm pushing up. Lowering down, pushing up. Yes. Now, if even doing push-ups on your knees feels like too much on the ground, you could do it on an elevated surface, you could do it on the wall, that's absolutely fine. You can make your way down to going on the floor. A push-up on a couch still counts just as much as a push-up on your feet. As long as you are doing the best of your ability, that's what matters the most. And the best real life example of needing to do push-ups is if you're in a mosh pit and you're literally pushing people away. And if you're like, Molly, I don't go in mosh pits that often, you should change that. Mosh pits are great. That is our breakdown for all things upper body. Now there are so many more like details and like nuances we can get into, but sometimes being so focused on every single detail is gonna hold you back from just getting the work done. These are the basics. This is what you need to know. If you know all of this and you can take this into your classes, into your practice, you are gonna become such a better athlete. So come back to this video every time you need a refresher, and I will see you in class.